Tom Bower has just dropped what many are already calling the biggest royal expose of the decade. This isn't rumour, this isn't speculation, this is a revelation so sharp, so unsettling, that it forces us to rethink everything we believed about Meghan and especially about little Lilith. Because for the first time, we don't just have unanswered questions. We don't just have timelines that don't line up now according to sources. There is something far heavier, what they claim is proof, and even more shocking. A witness who has stepped out of the shadows to speak, someone who says they saw things the public was never meant to notice, someone who alleges. Meghan once offered to pay her so her own daughter could appear on camera as Lilith, because, according to this revelation, Lilith may not exist at all. And tonight, we're opening that door. This is not a gentle story, this is the kind of truth that cracks open the Sussex narrative and dares us to follow the trail straight into the dark, so take a breath. Because once you hear what Tom Bower uncovered and what this witness claims, you'll understand why people are saying this expose doesn't just raise questions, it rewrites everything. The first crack in this story begins with an image so dramatic it felt pulled straight from a movie scene. Harry and Meghan leaving a hospital in the middle of a global lockdown, the streets empty, the world silent. And in their hands they say a tiny bundle, the remains of an unborn child. According to their own story, they carried that tiny soul to a secret place beneath a wide-spreading banyan tree, a hidden, sacred spot known only to them. A place where Harry says he dug into the soil with his bare hands and gently laid the package into the earth. It's a devastating image, and yet the closer you look, the more it begins to tremble. Because sources familiar with the area quietly point out something uncomfortable: banyan trees do not grow where the couple was living at the time. And medical professionals are equally firm no hospital, especially under strict COVID restrictions, would release fetal remains for a private burial. A husband would not be permitted inside the emergency wing during a miscarriage. And no burial of any pregnancy tissue would be legal on private land without official clearance. But the story was told with such emotion, such cinematic detail, that most people didn't question the gaps at first. Not until the second crack appeared. The math starts quietly, soft, almost innocent Harry and Meghan say the miscarriage happened in July 2020. Then, less than a year later, they announced the birth of a full-term daughter 11 months later. But when you factor in physical recovery, healing time and the actual length of a full pregnancy, the timeline begins to collapse. Not by days, not by weeks, but by entire months. Women around the world began doing the math themselves. And the numbers didn't work. What made it even more curious was that Archie was still a toddler at the time, and sources say Meghan was lifting him daily, something that becomes difficult and often discouraged during late pregnancy or early recovery. Yet, instead of addressing the timeline, the couple simply moved on. A new baby, a new announcement, a new chapter written directly over the old one, but the numbers stayed where they were: cold, sharp, unmoving. And those numbers lead to the next question. Did this story ever rest on medical reality at all? To understand the pressure behind it, we turn not to gossip or theories, but to fertility specialists' voices with nothing to gain and no reason to embellish. According to medical experts cited in the transcript, at age 39, a woman faces a 30 to 40% chance of miscarriage, a 50 to 60% chance of chromosomal abnormalities, and a miscarriage that is almost always early, quiet and clinically managed. Not a dramatic emergency, not a same-day discharge carrying a tiny package, not a secret burial beneath a tree that doesn't exist. Even more striking, experts say stress does not cause miscarriage in the way Harry described. It doesn't come from moving houses. It doesn't erupt from a newspaper lawsuit. It doesn't happen because a woman didn't sleep enough. Miscarriage is deeply emotional, yes, but medically speaking, it is most often the result of natural biological factors far beyond anyone's control. So, when Harry publicly pointed the finger at the media and said, "I believe my wife suffered a miscarriage because of what the media did," medical experts were unsettled, because buried inside that claim is something dangerous. It suggests miscarriage can be caused by someone else. It suggests blame can be assigned, and those who work with grieving women every single day know that isn't how miscarriage works. It isn't how the human body works. And it isn't how truth works, but while the public was still processing those contradictions, the story shifted again, its tone changed, its purpose changed. And when Meghan published her account of the loss, thousands of women felt something unexpected, not comfort, not connection, but something colder, something closer to disbelief. Because these women had lived it, they knew the silence. The shock, the heavy unspoken reality that lingers long after the moment itself, and in reflections quoted directly in the transcript they spoke plainly. Early miscarriages do not involve dramatic hospital scenes. Remains are not wrapped and handed to families for burial during strict COVID restrictions. Partners were often not allowed into exam rooms at all. And the emotional response Meghan described singing lullabies through the pain felt unfamiliar to many who had endured the experience themselves. One woman who suffered multiple miscarriages said reading Meghan's account felt gross, as if something sacred had been turned into performance. Another said she feared Meghan's framing placed a stigma on miscarriage by linking it to stress, and outside forces a message that directly contradicts what doctors tell grieving mothers who already carry guilt they do not deserve. And running through all of these testimonies was a quiet but powerful current. The story Meghan told did not match the world. These women knew. It wasn't the grief they questioned. Grief looks different for everyone. It was the framing, the details, the timing, and the way the loss appeared to be released with careful, polished precision. This wasn't just a story anymore. It was becoming a pattern, and that pattern led to the next source of doubt: her past. To understand the questions surrounding Meghan's pregnancies, we turn not to palaces' cameras or global headlines, but to the people who knew her before all of that. One voice in particular, her childhood best friend, Nanaki Priddy, who stepped forward years ago with claims that cracked open an entirely new layer of this story. According to her, Meghan had serious fertility concerns long before royal life ever entered the picture. She spoke openly about freezing her eggs. She talked about endometriosis, a condition known to make pregnancy extremely difficult. And most startling of all, Priddy claimed Meghan had undergone a hysterectomy at just 28 years old. Another friend, who chose to remain unnamed but agreed to speak, echoed similar concerns, saying Meghan had confided in her about debilitating pain and medical decisions that may have permanently altered her ability to conceive naturally. Now, none of these claims have been officially confirmed. But what makes them impossible to dismiss is simple. They come from people who once stood closest to her, people who put their names, their credibility, and their reputations on the line. And when these statements are placed beside the bending bump, the shifting timelines, the medical contradictions, the theatrical retellings, and the complete absence of publicly verifiable medical evidence, they form a puzzle with pieces that simply do not lock into the story the public has been shown. And this is where the narrative takes its sharpest turn. Because while friends spoke privately of medical limits, Meghan's public story showed something entirely different: multiple pregnancies. No visible struggle, no symptoms, and physical details that only raised more questions. But the next chapter introduces something even more unsettling: a moment where doubt did not come from critics, media, or outsiders, but allegedly from Harry himself. Every story has a moment where the mask slips, where the polished smiles fade, where something raw and unfiltered breaks through for Meghan. And Harry Tom Bower believes that moment came during the 2018 royal tour of Australia. Sources close to the trip described tension so thick it followed them into every room. Staff whispered about last-minute changes, sudden demands, and a tour meant to showcase Harry slowly turning into something else entirely. But the most striking moment, according to those present, happened behind closed doors during an argument overheard by multiple people. Harry, his voice tight, confused, allegedly asked Meghan a question no husband should ever have to ask his wife: "Are you really pregnant?" A sentence heavy enough to stop the air, a sentence that carries doubt, fear, and something deeper rising to the surface. Sources say the argument erupted after Meghan announced her pregnancy during the tour, without approval, without timing, without strategy, transforming a royal event into her personal spotlight. And the result was a husband who appeared strained, distracted, and, as several observers noted, visibly miserable for long stretches of the trip. That moment brief, as it was echoes loudly through this timeline. Because if Harry himself questioned the pregnancy, what did he see? What did he sense? And why did that question surface as all the cracks were widening? And this is where the story stops being confusing and starts becoming chilling. Because according to a public accusation made by a mother in Costa Rica, Meghan allegedly hired her young daughter to pose as Lilibet during a trip. This claim did not come from anonymous gossip. It came from a woman who put her name forward, stating clearly that Meghan never paid her and that no children were present with the royal couple during their stay. Sources say Meghan and Harry left early and left their hotel bill behind. Sources also say the child photographed bore little resemblance to the Lilibet shown in official images. And while that alone is shocking, it isn't the only anomaly. Another unexplained detail soon surfaced: a screenshot of a palace announcement stating that Archie was born via surrogate. Many claim they saw it in real time, but later a second screenshot appeared identical in every way except one. Instead of Kensington Palace, it read Frogmore Cottage. Two versions of the same announcement. No explanation, no origin, and neither ever acknowledged by the palace. This section of the story doesn't rest on whispers. These are claims made publicly, tied to names, tied to screenshots, tied to inconsistencies that have never been addressed. And all of it leads toward the final chapter, the one that sits at the core of this expose. Because once the pregnancy stories twist the bump, shifts the timelines wobble, and the children appear in ways no one can fully trace, only one question remains. This is where the story stops whispering and starts speaking. Because when you strip it all back, every strange detail, every contradiction, every claim made by friends and witnesses leads to one unavoidable question: who is Lilibet really? Tom Bower didn't invent this mystery. He simply shined a light on what was already there, buried beneath polished interviews and carefully staged images. Think about it: a miscarriage story built on impossible medical details. A pregnancy timeline so tight, it barely allows room to breathe. Experts saying the explanations defy basic biology. A husband who allegedly questioned the pregnancy himself. A bump that appears to fold a child who is allegedly represented by a stand-in. And royal announcements that appear, disappear, and reappear like messages from another world. Each detail on its own might seem curious, easy to dismiss. But taken together, they form something darker. A shadow, the outline of a secret someone worked very hard to keep buried. And that shadow falls directly over one name: Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor. Because if the pregnancies were not what they appeared to be, if timelines were adjusted, if friends told the truth about surgeries and medical limits, and if public inconsistencies point to something tightly controlled behind the scenes, then the question surrounding Lilibet is not cruel, it is not unfair, and it is not fabricated. It is necessary. A necessary question for royal lineage. A necessary question for the public record. A necessary question for the story Harry and Meghan have presented to the world. So we don't end with an answer, we end with a doorway. Because mysteries like this don't vanish, they wait quietly, patiently, until someone finally pulls the last thread. And when that thread is pulled, the truth about Lilibet may not just rewrite her story, it may rewrite the entire Sussex legacy. And that is where Tom Bower's next investigation begins.